One of the biggest questions was, I have a race coming up and I am not sure how to pace it. So this came in a lot of different forms. Either I'm going for a new pace, or maybe you've been training low heart rate the way I do, and so you're not totally sure what to do on race day. Here's the advice that I give pretty much all of my runners when we start talking about race day, and that is always start with your first mile being your slowest mile. And realistically, it almost never ends up actually being your slowest mile. But if you go in with that mindset, then you kind of reel yourself in, because in that first mile is when people explode out of the gate. And those are almost always the people that I will catch later in the course, because no matter how good you feel in that moment, that crazy blowing away your expected pace catches up with you later. This is partially because your body burns through that glycogen really fast. It's also because you're stretching and using your muscles in a way that they are just not accustomed to. Maybe you've done some sprints or intervals at that pace, but you haven't actually practiced sustaining that pace. So tip number one is to go out with the mindset that you want your first mile of the race to be your slowest. Again, you'll look at your watch later, it probably won't have been your slowest, but it will keep you from going crazy in there. If you're going for a PR, ideally figure out exactly the pace that you need to hit. So if you're going for, say, that sub 2 hour half marathon, it's like a 9:04. So I would be aiming to be at 9 or just under, because you don't want to get there to the end and realize you're just seconds over. The goal is to hit that pace start to finish. So go away from the idea of negative splits, or the idea that you want the second half of your race to be faster than the first half. The reason for that is it rarely works. Studies have actually shown that people who pace themselves consistently from the start to the finish more often than not actually have a PR. So they're hitting their best time because they found that pace and settled in consistently. Now, the caveat to that is when you're trying to run a new pace, or you're just not totally sure, a lot of times I will tell people, like, start out at that pace. If you're feeling good around halfway, pick it up just incrementally. This isn't like pick it up by a minute per mile, but just start to dial it up a little bit. And if you're still feeling good, say in the half marathon at mile 11, start to crank it up further from there. So you may finish and feel like, oh, I could have actually run that pace from start to finish, but it's better to be in that boat than to get to mile 11 and realize that you have nothing left and now you have to walk it in. Yes, absolutely. So finding that consistent pace that you can hold from start to finish is genuinely your best way of getting to a PR. So instead of trying to really focus on that negative split or getting too caught up in those first miles, make that your goal. So kind of figure out that pace. And like I said, if it's the 2 hour half marathon, that's your goal, and that's like a 9:04, I'd be aiming to run like right at 9 or 8:59, because most often we'll finish and our watch will say something like 13.2 or something like that. So you want just those couple extra seconds of padding. The other thing that's extremely helpful is to start doing goal pace runs during training. So you will build up these miles. It might start as like during one of your weekly interval sessions, you start throwing in 5 minutes at goal pace. And then the next week you do a mile at goal pace. And then maybe even during some of your longer runs as you're peaking, you're doing 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, depending on how long you've been running, at your goal pace. And the goal here is to teach your body exactly how that pace should feel. So a lot of times we're running intervals that are much, much faster, or we're doing our easy runs, which are much slower, but we're never actually telling our body what we want our goal to feel like. So those goal pace miles actually help you feel, what's your breathing like? What do your legs feel like? And sometimes they're a really good indicator if maybe you've picked a goal that was just too big of a stretch for where you currently are, which is fine. You make an adjustment and you keep looking at this race as another chance to learn and a chance to improve. I think we see people a lot of times who are making big jumps in their goals, and so we start to think we need to do that too. But you have to realize that even elite runners take about 10 years of running before they really start to hit their peak and start really setting those like huge races that we see. So running is a long game. It's not the short wins. Keep thinking about it as kind of the long